The day Zara found my gear collection wasn't supposed to be anything special. Just another Tuesday in our shared apartment. Me working late at the lab, her supposedly attending some interplanetary cultural exchange meeting downtown. But I knew something was wrong the moment I walked through our door and felt the static electricity in the air. That distinctive buzz that only happened when Zara was genuinely excited or absolutely furious. "Alex." Her voice called from my bedroom. My very private, always locked bedroom. My stomach dropped. 3 months of successfully hiding my collection from my non-human roommate, gone in an instant. I'd been so careful too, keeping everything under specialized dampening fields so her enhanced senses wouldn't detect the unusual materials. But I'd forgotten to lock the door in my rush this morning. Such a simple human mistake. "In here," she called again, voice lilting with that musical quality that emerged when she was particularly emotional. "Would you mind explaining this?" I stepped into my bedroom to find Zara hovering, literally floating 6 inches above my floor, over my open gear case. Her translucent skin had taken on a vibrant purplish hue, and the small bioluminescent spots across her temples were pulsing rapidly. Not anger then. Curiosity? Maybe even admiration? "I can explain," I started, ready to launch into the carefully prepared cover story I'd rehearsed for this exact scenario. Something boring about historical collection and academic interest, but Zara interrupted me with a sound halfway between a chirp and a laugh. "You're a guardian." I froze. Nobody on Earth was supposed to know about the Guardians. That information was classified at the highest galactic levels. The exchange program that had brought aliens like Zara to Earth was strictly cultural. No military or security connections allowed. So how did my seemingly naive alien roommate recognize specialized Guardian equipment instantly? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to sound confused while edging toward the case. If I could just close it before she identified the specific modifications. "This is a pulse disruptor," she said, pointing at what looked like an ordinary flashlight to untrained eyes. "And this," she gestured to what appeared to be a simple fitness tracker on my nightstand, "is a subspace communications band. Military grade." Her eyes, those large opalescent orbs, fixed on me with newfound intensity. "Only Guardians carry these." The carefully constructed ordinary life I'd built was crumbling around me. 3 years of deep cover work, establishing myself as just another human scientist participating in the exchange program, vanishing in seconds. "Who are you really, Zara?" I finally asked, dropping the pretense. My hand moved slowly toward the actual weapon hidden beneath my mattress. She smiled then, her face transforming as the chromatophores in her skin rearranged to reveal a symbol I recognized instantly. The mark of the Celestial Intelligence Service. "I could ask you the same question, Alex. Or should I say, Special Agent Thorne?" Her tentacle-like fingers gently closed my gear case. "Earth's premier guardian, sent to monitor the first wave of alien residents. Did your superiors tell you there might be others watching the Watchers?" My mind raced. A CIS agent as my roommate? The coincidence was too great. This was either the worst security breach in Guardian history or, "This isn't a coincidence, is it?" I said, relaxing my stance slightly but remaining alert. Zara's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed just a bit sharper than I remembered. "Let's just say your application for a roommate was prioritized." "So what happens now?" I asked, calculating escape routes, contingency plans, potential extraction points. Zara lowered herself to the floor, her feet touching down without a sound. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint cinnamon-like scent that her species naturally produced. "Now we have an honest conversation about why both our governments felt the need to plant operatives in this exchange program. About the real reason we're all here on Earth." She looked pointedly at a specific device in my case, the one piece of equipment I hadn't been able to identify myself, the one my superiors had insisted I carry without explanation. "Because I think, Alex, we might be protecting humanity from the same threat. And based on these readings," she gestured at a display on her wrist that had suddenly appeared, "we don't have much time left before they arrive." Outside our apartment window, just visible through the half-drawn blinds. The evening sky began to shimmer with an unnatural violet light. The violet light pulsed once, twice, then faded as if it had never been there. I glanced at Zara, whose expression had hardened into something I hadn't seen before, a look of focused determination that made her seem suddenly more soldier than scientist. "We need to move," she said, already gathering pieces of my gear and placing them back in the case with practiced efficiency. The pulse was a proximity alert. "They're scanning." "Who's scanning?" I asked, though part of me already knew. It was the threat we'd been briefed about in whispers, the reason for the Guardian program's revival after nearly 40 years of dormancy. The reason I'd been living this double life. "The Vex," Zara said, confirming my worst fears. "This isn't how first contact was supposed to happen. Not yet. We're still years away from humanity being ready." I snapped the case closed and grabbed my actual weapon from beneath the mattress. Not the decoy disruptors but the phase pistol calibrated to my DNA. "How much do you know about our side of this? About the history?" Zara's eyes narrowed slightly as she assessed me. "Enough to know that your grandfather was among the first to encounter them in 2042. The incident at Boreas Station. The one your government still insists was a training accident." My breath caught. Even within the Guardians, few knew the truth about Boreas. My connection to it was known by fewer still, a closely guarded secret that had shaped my entire life. "My grandpa never made it back," I said quietly, strapping the utility belt around my waist and checking the pistol's charge. "But he managed to send a warning. One message, heavily degraded. They harvest consciousness." Outside, the apartment complex's lights flickered. Down the hall, someone's television went silent mid-program. The building's smart system announced a temporary service interruption in that too calm automated voice. "It's starting," Zara murmured. Her fingers moved across her wrist display, activating something that caused her entire appearance to shift subtly. To human eyes, she'd now appear completely normal, no translucent skin, no bioluminescence. A perfect camouflage. "How long have your people known about the Vex?" I asked, rapidly switching my own gear to stealth mode. The dampening field expanded around us, hiding our tech signatures. "Since before we made contact with Earth," she replied, watching as I worked. "They've been moving through the outer systems for centuries, studying, taking samples, always staying just beyond detection range of developing civilizations until they decide it's time to harvest. And CIS sent you here because they thought Earth was next." Zara's expression softened for a moment. "Not exactly. I requested this assignment when I learned who you were, who your grandfather was. The data patterns from Boreas Station match incidents on 3 of our colony worlds. I believed you might have information we lack." The power in the building cut completely then, plunging us into darkness broken only by the city lights filtering through the window. Emergency systems kicked in seconds later, bathing the apartment in dim red light that I stared at Zara, processing what she'd just revealed. "You've been investigating me this whole time." "Yes," she admitted without apology. "And you've been monitoring me for signs of infiltration. We've both been doing our jobs, Alex." A bitter laugh escaped me. 6 months sharing takeout and bad movies, arguing over whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, and all of it was just part of your mission. Something flickered across her features, discomfort, perhaps even guilt. "Not all of it," she said quietly. "The Vex aren't the only ones who study consciousness, Alex. My people believe genuine connections, what you might call friendship, create quantum entanglements between minds. Those connections are real, regardless of why they formed." Before I could respond, a deep, subsonic rumble vibrated through the building's foundation. Not an earthquake, something else. Something directed. Searching, I moved to the window, keeping to the shadows as I peered out. The night sky above our neighborhood had taken on an unnatural clarity, stars unnaturally bright as if the atmosphere itself was being manipulated. 3 blocks away, a perfect circle of darkness hovered above the park where the weekly alien-human cultural exchange meetings were held. "They're looking for something specific," I whispered. Zara joined me at the window, her body temperature dropping as her species' fight response kicked in. Not something, she said grimly. Someone. The exchange program wasn't just cultural, Alex. It was a screening program. Both our governments have been watching for signs of Vex infiltration among the delegates. Hybrid consciousness. The realization hit me like a physical blow. That's why we needed watchers. And watchers watching the watchers. Zara nodded, her eyes tracking the methodical movement of the darkness. We missed something though. The Vex shouldn't be moving this openly, this soon. The wrist communicator I thought I'd successfully hidden from her throughout our roommate arrangements suddenly activated, General Davis's voice crisp despite the interference. Agent Thorne, Protocol Umbra is now active. Converge on Extraction Point Delta with your package immediately. Zara stared at my wrist, then back at my face. Package? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. I met her gaze steadily. That would be you. Zara's skin rippled with rapidly shifting colors, anger, betrayal, and something else I couldn't quite identify. You were ordered to extract me? Since when? Since before we met, I admitted, checking the pistol's charge again to avoid meeting her eyes. Contingency plan only. If certain conditions were met. What conditions? Her voice had grown dangerously quiet, the building trembled again, dust filtering down from the ceiling. We didn't have time for this conversation, but I knew we wouldn't make it to Extraction Point Delta if she didn't trust me. If the Vex made their move, I said. Or if we confirmed you had critical intelligence about them. Turns out both are happening simultaneously. Her eyes narrowed. And you're just following orders? Taking me to your superiors so they can what? Dissect my brain for information. That's not, I started, but the look on her face stopped me. Of course that's what she would think. It's probably what her people would do in the same situation. Zara, I swear it's not like that. We need to pool our knowledge. Both sides have been keeping secrets, and now we're out of time. A high-pitched whine cut through the air, making my teeth ache. The circle of darkness above the park had begun to expand, swallowing stars as it grew. We need to move, I said, slinging the gear bag over my shoulder. Whether you trust me or not, we can't stay here. That scanning pulse will find us soon, and neither of us wants to be around when it does. Zara's gaze flicked to the window, then back to me. The tactical part of her brain was clearly running the same calculations I was. Finally, she nodded once. I'll come with you to your extraction point, but I maintain my own autonomy. If I sense a trap, I'm gone. Fair enough. I checked the secure blueprints on my wrist display. Service tunnel in the basement. It'll take us through the maintenance network under the city. We should be able to avoid detection if we stay within the dampening field. We moved silently through the darkened apartment hallways, emergency lights casting everything in an eerie red glow. The elevator was offline, so we took the stairs, passing confused neighbors who thought this was just another power outage. If they only knew. 4th floor, everyone stay in your apartments, a building security officer was announcing. We're experiencing system-wide failures. Please remain calm. I caught Zara's eye. The officer's voice had a slightly mechanical undertone. Not obvious enough for humans to notice, but there was something off about his movements too. Too fluid, too precise. Hybrid, she mouthed silently. My hand moved to my weapon. Taking out a Vex-compromised human would blow our cover, but letting it report our presence would be worse. Zara shook her head fractionally and pointed to her temple. Understanding her intent, I reached into my pocket for the neural disruptor, a small device that looked like a key fob but would temporarily scramble the hybrid's connection to its Vex controller without harming the human host. As we approached the stairwell door, I fumbled the key fob deliberately, dropping it near the officer's feet. Sorry, I mumbled, bending to retrieve it. When my fingers closed around the device, I activated it with a quick double press. The security officer froze mid-sentence, eyes rolling back as the neural interface temporarily shorted out. He'd recover in about 10 minutes. With no memory of seeing us, we slipped into the stairwell and raced down toward the basement level, the sounds of confusion from the upper floors growing more distant. Halfway down, the entire building shuddered violently, throwing us against the wall. They're triangulating the scan, Zara said grimly. They know something interrupted their hybrid's transmission. When we reached the basement, I realized immediately something was wrong. The maintenance door that should have led to the service tunnels was already open, its security panel flashing red. Someone's been here, I whispered, drawing my phase pistol. Recently. Zara extended her hand, releasing a fine mist of bioluminescent particles that drifted through the air, settling on nearly invisible footprints leading into the dark tunnel. Not human footprints. We're not alone, she said, her voice barely audible. I switched my tactical glasses to thermal imaging mode, scanning the darkness ahead. Nothing registered, which itself was telling. Only Vex Tech could mask a heat signature that completely. Options? I asked, falling into the shorthand we developed during training exercises neither of us had acknowledged we knew the other was doing. Forward is compromised. Backtracking puts us in the open. Parallel route. I nodded, pulling up the blueprint again. Utility shaft. Here. I pointed to a narrow passage marked on the schematic. It'll be tight, but it connects to the main tunnel network about half a kilometer out. The utility shaft turned out to be even narrower than the blueprint suggested, a claustrophobic concrete tube barely wide enough for our shoulders. We shuffled sideways through the darkness, guided only by the dim light of my tactical glasses and the soft glow emanating from Zara's skin. Your grandfather, she said suddenly, her voice echoing slightly in the confined space. What happened to him after he sent that message? I hesitated. This wasn't the time for personal history, but something in her tone told me it mattered. Officially, he died in the accident. Unofficially, they never found a body. Just his ID tags and a partial recording. That's why I joined the program. I need to know the truth. Zara was quiet for a moment. The Vex don't just take bodies, Alex. They take minds. Consciousnesses. If they took him, the implication hit me like a physical blow. You think he could still be alive? As some kind of hybrid? Or stored? Preserved? They collect unique minds like humans collect art. Especially minds that resist them. Before I could process this, a low vibration ran through the concrete around us. Not the scanning pulse this time, something more focused. Deliberate. They're tracking the neural disruptor's energy signature, Zara hissed. We need to dump it. I reached for my pocket, but Zara grabbed my wrist. Wait, they're expecting that. They want us to reveal our position. The vibration intensified, concrete dust showering down on us as hairline cracks appeared in the walls. If we keep it, they find us, I said through gritted teeth. If we dump it, they find us. What's option 3? Zara's eyes locked with mine, that strange determination returning to her face. We use it. Amplify the signal instead of hiding it. Create a false positive so big they can't ignore it. That would require, I started, then realized what she was suggesting. No, absolutely not. The power surge would fry your neural pathways. Not if we calibrate it to my specific frequency, she countered, already reaching for the device. My people have natural defenses against neural intrusion. That's why the Vex hate us so much. I can channel the pulse and direct it. It's suicide, I argued, even as another, stronger tremor shook the passage. The concrete above us cracked ominously. We had seconds, not minutes. Trust me, Zara said, her fingers already working to modify the disruptor's settings. Like I'm trusting you. She pressed the device against her temple just as the ceiling began to collapse. A blinding flash of blue-white light erupted from her body, exploding outward in a concussive wave that threw me against the wall. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was Zara's outline, silhouetted against the pulse of energy, her body arched in what looked like agony, and behind her, emerging from the broken concrete of the ceiling, a writhing mass of darkness extending tendrils toward us both. Consciousness returned in painful fragments. First came the ringing in my ears, then the taste of concrete dust and blood in my mouth. I forced my eyes open to find myself sprawled in what remained of the utility shaft, emergency lights flickering weakly through the haze. The neural pulse had blown out most of the electronics in the vicinity, leaving us in semi-darkness. Zara? My voice was hoarse, barely audible even to my own ears. I pushed myself upright, ignoring the stabbing pain in my ribs. Zara! Something moved in the shadows ahead. Not Zara. The movement was wrong, too fluid and unnaturally precise. One of the dark tendrils I'd seen before losing consciousness was probing through the debris, searching. I froze, hardly daring to breathe as it waved lazily in my direction, seeming to taste the air. Then it withdrew suddenly as if burned. The space where it had been rippled, and Zara materialized out of nothing, her camouflage dropping as she staggered forward and collapsed against me. "It worked," she whispered, her voice ragged. "The pulse confused their network. They think we're elsewhere." Her skin was pale, almost translucent, the bioluminescent spots across her temples flickering erratically. The neural disruptor had exacted a heavy toll. "We need to keep moving," I said, supporting her weight as we stumbled through the partially collapsed tunnel. "Extraction point Delta isn't far." We emerged into the main service tunnel, a larger passage that ran beneath the city streets. It should have been deserted at this hour, but ahead of us, I could make out silhouettes moving with military precision. Human silhouettes. "Guardian response team," I murmured, relief washing over me. "We made it." Zara stiffened against me. "Wait," she hissed. "Something's wrong." I squinted into the darkness. She was right. The team's movements were too coordinated, too perfect. And they weren't using tactical lights, moving confidently through the darkness as if they could see perfectly. No human could navigate like that without equipment. "Hybrids," I breathed. "All of them." We ducked behind a maintenance panel as the squad moved past our position. 8 former Guardians, now moving in perfect unison, their eyes vacant. Each wore standard-issue Guardian gear, but something dark and glistening pulsed beneath their collar lines, extending thin filaments up their necks. "The Vex have compromised your command," Zara whispered. "They knew about the extraction points. Protocol Umbra is a trap." Cold realization washed over me. If Delta was compromised, all the extraction points would be. There would be no reinforcements, no rescue. We were on our own. "We need a new plan," I said, checking my weapons charge. Half power, enough for a fighting retreat, but not enough to take on 8 hybrids that Zara's eyes had taken on a feverish glow. I received a transmission during the pulse. Fragmented but clear enough. "CIS has a containment protocol in place, Operation Blacklight. A ship hidden at these coordinates." She projected a map from her wrist display, showing a location on the outskirts of the city. "That's the old aerospace museum," I said. "Decommissioned years ago." "Perfect cover for an emergency evac vessel," she replied. "But we have to hurry. The window closes in 40 minutes. We changed direction, moving away from the hybrid squad, deeper into the maintenance tunnels. My tactical glasses were beginning to work again, providing a rudimentary map of the underground network. If we pushed hard, we might reach the museum in time. As we moved, Zara's condition worsened. The neural pulse had damaged something essential in her physiological systems. Twice she stumbled, and the second time her camouflage flickered, revealing a network of dark lines beneath her skin, lines that hadn't been there before. "Zara," I said, stopping to examine the marks. "What is this?" She pulled away. "A side effect of the pulse." "It's nothing." But I recognized the pattern. I'd seen it before, in classified files about Boreas Station. About what happened to the personnel there. "It's Vex," I said, stepping back involuntarily. "You're infected." "No," she insisted, her eyes flashing. "Not infected. Inoculated. There's a difference." "What are you talking about?" She sighed, glancing nervously down the tunnel. "We don't have time for this, but you deserve to know. My people developed a countermeasure against Vex infiltration. A controlled exposure that allows us to interface with their network without being subsumed by it. I've been carrying it since I arrived on Earth." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You've been walking around with Vex tech inside you this entire time? Do you have any idea how dangerous?" "Of course I do," she snapped. "But it's the only way to gather intelligence on them." to predict their movements. It's how I knew they were coming for Earth, how I found you. Her voice softened. How I knew about your grandfather. The mention of my grandfather stopped me cold. What about him? Zara hesitated, then met my gaze directly. He's alive, Alex. After a fashion. The Vex have him in what they call their consensus archive. A repository of minds they consider valuable. My mouth went dry. How do you know that? Because I've seen it. Through the interface. His consciousness pattern is distinctive. It's been resisting integration for decades. The longest any human mind has ever held out. Hope and horror crashed over me in equal measure. If what she was saying was true, then some fragment of my grandfather still existed, trapped within the Vex network. But extracting a consciousness from the archive had never been done. Before I could respond, a deep rumbling vibration rolled through the tunnels, different from the scanning pulses before. This was deeper, more powerful. The concrete around us began to crack as dust rained down from the ceiling. They're bringing something through, Zara said, her voice tight with fear. Something big. We broke into a run, navigating the increasingly unstable tunnels as the rumbling intensified. Ahead, a maintenance ladder led up to street level. Our best chance now was to get above ground and make for the museum directly. I climbed first, pushing aside the heavy manhole cover and emerging onto an eerily deserted street. The city that should have been full of late-night activity was silent, darkened. In the distance, emergency sirens wailed, but there was no sign of police or first responders. Just abandoned vehicles and the occasional shoe or bag dropped in what appeared to be a panicked evacuation. I helped Zara up, noting with alarm how the dark lines beneath her skin had spread further. Whatever benefit her inoculation had provided was fading. Look, she whispered, pointing toward the sky. Above us, the stars were vanishing, swallowed by an expanding void that now covered nearly half the visible sky. At its center, something was taking shape, a massive structure descending through the atmosphere. It wasn't a ship, at least not in any conventional sense. It looked more like a floating city, its architecture both organic and mechanical, with vast sections that seemed to shift and reconfigure themselves as we watched. The harvester, Zara breathed. They only deploy those when they're ready for final extraction. My wrist communicators suddenly activated, but instead of General Davis's voice, a different tone emerged, distorted, layered, as if multiple voices were speaking in unison. Guardian Thorn, the voices said. We've been waiting for you. For both of you. The communicator's small display flickered, resolving into an image that made my blood freeze. A face I recognized from photographs that had sat on my mother's mantle my entire life. Older now, lined with decades of experience, but unmistakable my grandfather. Alex, he said, his voice now separate from the others, though still distorted. You need to listen carefully. What you've been told about the Vex, about what's happening, it's not the whole truth. The harvester isn't what you think. Zara grabbed my wrist, turning the display toward her. Don't listen, she urged. It's a trick. The Vex are using his image to manipulate you. But something in his eyes, that same determined look my mother always said I'd inherited, made me hesitate. The coordinates Zara gave you, my grandfather continued urgently. It's not an evacuation site. It's a containment facility for something the CIS discovered decades ago. Something they've been keeping from both our species. His image started to break up, interference cutting through. The real threat isn't the Vex, Alex. It's what's inside that museum. And they're using you to take Zara right to it. I stared at the flickering image of my grandfather, mind racing. Every instinct I'd developed as a guardian screamed that this was a trap, a Vex manipulation designed to create doubt. But there was something in his eyes, something genuine that transcended the digital distortion. Alex, we don't have time for this, Zara urged, tugging at my arm. The harvester is nearly in position. Once it establishes a full atmospheric lock, there's no stopping the extraction process. What's inside the museum? I demanded, ignoring her and addressing my grandfather's image. If not an evacuation ship, then what? It's a quantum gateway, he replied, his image breaking up further. Built from something the CIS discovered in deep space. They've been studying it for decades, trying to weaponize it against the Vex. But they don't understand what they're dealing with. The communication suddenly cut out as a massive electromagnetic pulse swept through the area. All around us, the few remaining functional streetlights exploded in showers of sparks. My tactical glasses died, and Zara's wrist display flickered out. "We need to keep moving," she insisted, her eyes darting nervously to the sky where the harvester continued its ominous descent. "Whether your grandfather was telling the truth or not, standing here makes us easy targets." She was right about that much at least. We sprinted down the deserted streets, weaving between abandoned vehicles. The Aerospace Museum was visible in the distance, its distinctive dome silhouetted against the unnatural darkness spreading across the sky. "If what he said is true," I panted as we ran, "why would your people want you there? Why send you to Earth at all?" Zara didn't answer immediately, focusing on navigating around a pileup of cars at an intersection. When we paused in the shadow of a building to catch our breath, she finally turned to me. "I told you I requested this assignment because of your grandfather," she said quietly. "But I never told you why." She placed her hand over her heart in what I recognized as a formal gesture among her people. Torin Thorn was the first human to ever save one of our kind from the Vex. At Boreas Station, he sacrificed himself to allow my mother to escape with information vital to developing our defense systems. I stared at her, stunned into silence. All these years, I'd believed my grandfather had died alone, abandoned on a remote research station. The truth had been buried under layers of classified files and interdepartmental secrecy. "My mother named me for him," Zara continued. "Zara, it means shield bearer in our language. A title of honor given to those who protect others at great personal cost." Her eyes met mine. "I didn't come to Earth just to monitor aliens or find Vex infiltrators. I came to repay a debt." The dark lines beneath her skin pulsed, spreading visibly now. Whatever control she'd maintained over her inoculation was failing. "Then why lead us to the museum?" I asked. "If there's something dangerous there, because it's our only chance," she replied grimly. "The quantum gateway is real. CIS discovered it 30 years ago and has been studying it in secret. It creates a bridge between dimensions, between realities. My people believe it could be used to create a permanent barrier between our universe and the space the Vex inhabit. Or it could tear reality apart," I countered. "That's always been the risk." She glanced up at the harvester, now so massive it filled half the sky. "But now we're out of options. The Vex have accelerated their timetable. This isn't just about harvesting minds anymore. They're preparing for full integration. Earth is just the beginning." As if to confirm her words, the air around us began to shimmer and distort. Translucent, tendrilled forms began to materialize on the street, Vex manifestations entering our physical space without the need for human hosts. They moved with terrible purpose, converging on our position that we broke into a dead sprint for the museum, no longer bothering with stealth. The building's entrance was sealed, massive doors locked down under emergency protocols. But Zara led me around to a service entrance, where she quickly interfaced with the security panel. Despite the EMP, this door had independent power. "CIS emergency protocols," she explained as the door slid open. Some systems were hardened against Vex interference. Inside, the museum was dark and silent. Display cases containing antique aircraft and spacecraft stood like ghosts in the gloom. But Zara moved with confidence, leading me past the public exhibits toward a restricted area marked Private Collection, Authorized Personnel Only. Beyond these doors lay something very different from vintage planes. The room was a massive laboratory, filled with equipment far beyond current Earth technology. At its center stood a circular platform surrounded by what looked like particle accelerator components. The platform itself contained a crystalline structure that seemed to both absorb and emit light simultaneously, a visual contradiction that hurt my eyes to look at directly. The gateway, Zara breathed as we approached. The crystal pulsed, responding to our presence. Or more specifically, to Zara. The dark lines beneath her skin flared in response, creating a visual echo of the crystal's patterns. "You're connected to it," I realized with growing alarm. "That's not just Vex tech in your system, it's somehow linked to this thing." She nodded, her expression solemn. "The inoculation contains particles from the gateway. It's how we've been able to study it safely. The Vex want this technology, Alex. They fear it. It's the one thing in the universe that could truly stop them. Or help them complete their invasion." Came a familiar voice from behind us. I spun around to find General Davis standing in the doorway, flanked by Guardian operatives. Unlike the hybrid squad we'd encountered earlier, these were clearly still human, their expressions alert and focused. "Sir," I began, but he cut me off. "At ease, Agent Thorne. We've been monitoring your progress. Your diversion with the neural pulse was ingenious. It bought us the time we needed to evacuate essential personnel and prepare the final phase." Zara tensed beside me. "What final phase?" The general's eyes hardened as he looked at her. "The destruction of the gateway. We can't allow either side to control it. The risks are too great." "But it's our only chance to stop the harvester," Zara protested. "Is it?" The general raised an eyebrow. "Or is that just what the Vex want you to believe? We've seen the progression of the inoculation in your system. It's no longer under your control, is it? They're using you as a conduit." I looked at Zara, really looked at her. The dark lines had nearly covered her visible skin now, pulsing in sync with the crystal. Her eyes had taken on the same strange luminescence. "Zara?" I whispered. She met my gaze, and for a moment I saw fear in her eyes. "I can feel them, Alex. At the edges of my consciousness. Pushing. But I'm still me. I'm still fighting." The building shook violently as something massive impacted nearby. Through the laboratory's high windows, I could see the underside of the harvester now positioned directly above the museum. "We're out of time," General Davis announced. He nodded to his team, who began attaching explosive devices around the perimeter of the gateway platform. 30 seconds to detonation. "Everyone clear the area." "Wait." I moved to stand between the team and Zara. "If we destroy it, what happens to the Vex already here? What happens to the people they've taken? To my grandfather?" "Sacrifices must be made in war, Agent Thorne," the general replied coldly. "You know that." "There's another way," Zara said suddenly, her voice overlaid with harmonics that hadn't been there before. She stepped toward the crystal, which pulsed more intensely in response. "I can use the connection. Reverse the integration process. Create a feedback loop through the gateway." "It would kill you," I realized. She smiled sadly. "A shield bearer's final duty. I can't let you do this." "It's not your choice, Alex." She placed her hand on my cheek, her touch leaving a faint luminescent trace. "Your grandfather showed me that sometimes one life can save many. I always hoped to be worthy of the name he inspired." Before I could stop her, she stepped onto the platform and placed her hands directly on the crystal. Energy surged through her body, lifting her off the ground as the dark lines beneath her skin flared with blinding intensity. The crystals pulsing synchronized perfectly with her heartbeat, visible through her now transparent skin. "Clear the room," General Davis shouted, but nobody moved. Transfixed by the spectacle before us, Zara's body began to dissolve, molecules separating as she merged with the crystal structure. But instead of fear, her face showed only fierce determination. The crystal's energy shot upward in a blinding column, punching through the ceiling directly into the harvester above. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The harvester's organic components began to wither and contract, while its mechanical sections sparked and failed. The void it had created in the sky began to close in on itself, stars reappearing one by one. Throughout the museum, we could hear the sounds of the manifested Vex forms shrieking as they were pulled back through whatever dimensional barrier they had crossed. I shielded my eyes as the light from the crystal became unbearable. When it finally faded, the platform stood empty. Both Zara and the crystal were gone. "My God," General Davis whispered. She inverted the gateway. Used their own network against them. The tremors stopped. The air, which had felt thick and oppressive under the Harvester's influence, suddenly cleared. Outside, dawn was breaking over the city. One of the monitoring stations in the lab suddenly activated, displaying readings from around the globe. Vex signatures were vanishing everywhere, their network collapsing. Is it over? I asked, my voice hoarse. Not over, the general replied. But we've won a major battle. Their integration attempt has failed. It will take them decades to recover from this setback. I approached the empty platform, feeling hollow despite our apparent victory. The price had been too high. First my grandfather, now Zara. Both gone, fighting an enemy most of humanity would never even know existed. As I turned to leave, my tactical glasses, somehow functioning again, picked up an anomalous reading from the platform. A small, crystalline shard remained, easily overlooked among the debris. It pulsed once as I approached, with a rhythm I recognized instantly. A heartbeat. Zara's heartbeat. I picked it up carefully, and at my touch, it projected a holographic message. My grandfather's face, clearer now than on the communicator, appeared before me. If you're seeing this, Alex, then Zara succeeded, he said. The gateway works both ways. What the Vex used to harvest consciousness, we can use to restore it. Zara knew the risks, that her physical form would be lost, but her consciousness remains within the crystal network, as does mine. We're not gone. We're just elsewhere. Find the other gateway shards. With enough of them, you can rebuild the bridge. Bring us home. The hologram faded, but the shard continued to pulse warmly in my palm, synchronized perfectly with my own heartbeat now. A connection. A promise. Outside, sirens wailed as emergency services finally entered the area. The official cover story would soon be disseminated. A gas main explosion, a terrorist attack, some plausible explanation that would let people return to their normal lives, unaware of how close they had come to annihilation. But I had a new mission now. The war wasn't over, just entering a different phase. Somewhere between dimensions, Zara and my grandfather were waiting. And shield bearers never abandon their own. I slipped the crystal shard into my pocket and stepped out into the dawn of a world that had been saved by an alien roommate nobody would ever know about. Nobody except me. 3 months after what the public now called the blackout incident, I stood on the rooftop of my new apartment building, watching the sunset. The city had largely recovered, at least on the surface. Damaged areas were under reconstruction, and most people had accepted the official explanation of a massive power grid failure combined with some vague terrorist threat that had been neutralized. Only a handful of us knew the truth. Fewer still understood what came next. I rolled the crystal shard between my fingers, feeling its now familiar warmth. It had become a part of me these past months, a constant companion that sometimes whispered in frequencies only I could hear. Not with words exactly, but with impressions, emotions, and occasionally fragments of memory. Enough to know that both Zara and my grandfather were still in there somewhere, still fighting. My phone buzzed with a message from Director Chin, who had replaced General Davis after his mysterious retirement following the incident. Unlike her predecessor, Chin seemed genuinely committed to understanding the Vex rather than simply destroying them. She had also authorized my new assignment, Operation Lighthouse, a covert mission to locate the remaining gateway shards scattered around the globe. Package secured in Mumbai, the message read. Third shard matches crystalline signature. Extraction team en route to rendezvous. 3 shards now. Progress, however slow. I tucked the phone away and leaned against the railing, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. According to the latest briefings, the Vex had withdrawn from our part of the galaxy entirely, a retreat unprecedented in their known history. Zara's sacrifice had done more than stop the immediate invasion, it had fundamentally disrupted their entire network. But as both history and my grandfather's notes had taught us, the Vex were patient. They would adapt. They would return. You look like someone with the weight of the universe on their shoulders, came a voice from behind me. I turned to find Dr. Rivera, the quantum physicist who had been assigned to study the gateway technology. She'd been skeptical at first, A pure scientist thrown into a world of interdimensional invaders and consciousness transfer. But she'd adapted quickly. Had to. Just the weight of 2 people, I replied, holding up the shard. 2 very important people. She nodded, joining me at the railing. The resonance patterns in the Mumbai shard are promising. It's communicating with yours at a quantum level. With each one we recover, the signal gets stronger. And your calculations? Still holding. 7 is the magic number. 7 shards to recreate a stable gateway matrix. She hesitated. But Alex, you need to understand, even if we succeed, what comes through might not be exactly what went in. Consciousness is complex. Being stored in a crystalline network for months, maybe years, they'll be different, I acknowledged. So will the world. But they deserve a chance to come home. Rivera studied me for a moment, then pulled a tablet from her bag and brought up a classified file. We completed the full analysis of your grandfather's original message from Borea Station. The part about harvesting consciousness wasn't the whole phrase. The degradation obscured the ending. I stiffened. What did it actually say? They harvest consciousness to preserve what they believe we would destroy, she read. It changes things, doesn't it? Makes you wonder what they were trying to save. I thought about this as night fully embraced the city, lights flickering on below us like earthbound stars. The Vex had been portrayed as invaders, harvesters, collectors. But if my grandfather's complete message was correct, perhaps their motives were more complex. Perhaps they saw themselves as preservationists in a universe of destroyers. Have you gone through our apartment yet? Rivera asked, changing the subject. I hadn't. To everything that happened, I couldn't bring myself to pack up Zara's things. Her ridiculous collection of Earth action movies. Her notebooks filled with observations on human behavior, some insightful, some hilariously wrong. The plant she'd nearly killed by talking to it in ultrasonics, not realizing Earth vegetation didn't communicate that way. Not yet, I admitted. It's still technically a secure site. Well, when you do, Rivera said, you might want to check behind the ventilation panel in her bedroom. Our scan picked up something there. Some kind of containment unit. Alien tech, but not Vex. Older. Much older. My pulse quickened. Did you recover it? She shook her head. Above my clearance. But not above yours, Special Agent Thorne. As she left, I stared back at the shard in my hand. It pulsed more rapidly now, as if excited. Or warning me. The impressions coming through were stronger than before, urgency mixed with something like hope. In my pocket, the phone buzzed again. Another message from Director Chin. Anomalous energy signature detected at your former residence. Team standing by for your authorization to investigate. I sent back a quick reply. Hold position. I'll handle this personally. Whatever Zara had hidden in our apartment, she had kept it secret even from her CIS handlers. Something important enough to conceal, but not to take with her when she made her sacrifice. Something she had left behind, for me. The shard pulsed once more in my hand, and this time I could almost swear I heard Zara's voice, just one word, hurry. I took one last look at the night sky, wondering if somewhere out there, the Vex were watching too. Wondering if they understood yet what they had lost in their battle for Earth. Not just access to the gateway technology or a foothold in our dimension, but something far more valuable, the unwavering determination of the human spirit when protecting those they care about. And the sacrificial courage of one alien who had become more human than she ever expected. I'm coming, I whispered to the shard, to the stars, to whoever might be listening across the dimensional divide. Hold on. Both of you. I'm coming. As I turned to leave the rooftop, the stars seemed to pulse once in response. Just my imagination, prop. Or maybe, just maybe, a sign that in this vast, strange universe, some connections transcend even the boundaries between worlds. Some stories don't end. They just wait for the next chapter to begin.